If you're like me, you go to do a project and you can just get lost with information on the internet, just searching and searching. One person says do it this way, another person says do it that way. Building a driveway is no different. There's lots of information out there, lots of different ways to do it, and they all can be effective in the long run. But if you are looking for a straightforward, simple points, simple steps, this is the video for you. Hey, I'm Chad. This is Excavation Revelation, where excavating tips and tricks and procedures are revealed to help make you as efficient as possible. A driveway, it's basically the artery to somebody's house. They are the first thing people see when they come onto your property. They're actually the first thing that they encounter when they come on your property. They enter your driveway. It is something that needs to be built solid, something that needs to be built to last. This is not the time to skip out, be cheap, be skimpy. This is the time to make it last. You want to make sure that it holds up for years to come and for different variables, trucks, deliveries. You want to make sure this thing is rock solid. The first step in making a solid driveway is your location. Now, you might have an engineer involved, which is great. They will really help in this process. They'll take their time coming out, measuring, looking at things, soils, many different variables. If they're involved, great. Just go with what they recommend. You should be in good shape. One thing to consider is your local zoning laws. If you need a permit, building permit, construction permit, and also your zoning laws. You want to make sure that you put this thing in where it needs to be. If it's too close to your neighbor's property, if there's zoning issues, then you'll have to remove it. If you make it too steep going down the road, whether it's a PennDOT road or a state road, I'm in Pennsylvania, so we have PennDOT, you could potentially have to rip that out and redo it according to their specs. You got to make sure you do your research, make sure permits are purchased if needed, or that you have your local zoning approval and the measurements and the records straight. Once that's out of the way, you want to really go with the homeowner and you want to see where this driveway is going to go, where it would make most sense to them, what their vision is. Most of the time you can make their vision happen, but not always. So there are some different variables you want to consider. First, you want to keep an eye out for different obstacles such as trees, power lines, etc. You don't want to get too close to trees, for example. If you dig into their roots too much, you could potentially kill the tree. It might take a couple years, but eventually it's going to harm the tree. Power lines are very similar. If you're getting close to the telephone pole, you got to watch how close you dig to it and what's buried underneath. You always want to do a one call to get utilities marked at any time you're done excavating. You just need to be careful of these obstacles, especially if you've got large trucks coming in to dump your stone, large dump trucks. You need to keep in mind branches, different things that are overhanging. You just got to be careful how you go about this. So if it's possible, try to get away from trees. I know it's not always the case, especially if you're going in through a wooded area, but try to avoid trees, being close to trees if at all possible. You also want to check out the soil. You want to make sure that it's a nice virgin area, not somewhere that they've been dumping fill for years, different products. Who knows? Sometimes you don't know what's buried underneath there. You want to make sure it's a nice, solid, virgin area. But if that's not the case, if you absolutely have to go through somewhere else, there are different means to go about it, usually just digging down deeper and adding more stone, more base. But try to avoid that if possible. It just creates less headache. You also want to look out for water. If there's a spring in the area, a really wet area, try to avoid those as well. Yes, you can do drains and get that cleared up, but it's just much simpler if you can avoid that if possible. And the last thing to look at is just the overall aesthetics of the driveway, where the homeowner wants it, and how to make it feasible. Now, if they're going to be driving their cars on it every day, obviously you want to make sure that it's somewhere that they can use it easily. You want to make sure that it's nice and spacious, that they're not getting overcrowded, and that it's something that they're going to enjoy each and every day, because they are going to use it each and every day. That leads us into our next step, the calculations. We were just talking about the different sizes. You want to first test this out with a vehicle. Say the homeowner drives a big pickup truck. You want to make sure that that pickup truck can fit on the driveway, can get backed up park, turn around, whatever they got to do, nice and easy. So it's a good idea to bring it on the driveway, drive on a couple times, see where it's going to go, see how tight the turns are, see how easy it is to maneuver. You don't want to be building a driveway, then the homeowner have to just fight every day to use it, to get in and out. Make sure it's big enough too for lots of parking if they've got a large family or looked at a large family down the road. It's always better. I know it's more expensive, but it's always better to go a little bit bigger than a little bit smaller. You see a lot of places extending their driveways or widening their driveways. It's much easier and cheaper to do it one time than down the road, but it always could be done down the road. You want to start calculating your dimensions. You want to start measuring. Either take a measuring wheel, measuring tape, depending how long the driveway is. You want to start looking for your length and your width. And this is just a simple process to do some calculating to figure out how many tons of gravel you're going to need, how much it's to start figuring out rough costs, all sorts of things like that. You also want to, at this time, start calculating your stone size. Again, this is something that just by looking at the soil types, issues such as water, different soil conditions, and some of this you won't really know until you start digging. But a good rule of thumb, something that I usually do is, especially if it's a shorter driveway, is I like to calculate for road fabric, non-woven. It just makes a nice barrier between the gravel and the soil. It helps getting them mixed in place. A common misconception with this fabric is people think it's a weed barrier, and it's not that, because it's going to be so deep that weeds could potentially grow above it if it's just going to be a gravel finish. But you want to make sure that you get a barrier to help keep the stone from sinking into the mud, or vice versa, keep that wet soil from pushing up into the stone and mixing in. It just helps make it a lot more solid. Now, I understand if your driveway is a quarter mile long that it's going to be very expensive. That's not really necessary, but if possible, try to use road fabric. It really helps out. And it can also cut down on your stone usage as well. I typically like to use a base layer of 4 to 5 inches. It's a bigger stone. I usually try to get about the fist size. Around here, we call them the number 4 in our local quarries, but the different AASHTO numbers around are a little bit different. You then want to follow that 4-inch base layer with a 4-inch layer, or your 4-inch sub base with a 4-inch layer of base. It's usually some sort of stone, like a quarter size, mixed with dust. They call it modified. That will pack in real tight and solid. Then from there on, you can put your asphalt, or if you're on concrete, whatever you use. You just need your sub base, then your base stone. Then you can move on to your other material. So I like to do 4, 4, and 4. Usually people, they pave in 4 inches of asphalt, or they'll put down 4 inches of concrete. You want to just make sure you have a layer of sub base 4 inches, at least 4 to 5, a layer of modified 4 inches, then you can do your top coating about 4 inches. So overall, usually I try to shoot for around a foot, but that's going to vary a lot depending on conditions. You definitely don't want to skimp on this. You want to build this thing to last. And if it's a real sandy area or it's going to be a little softer, you obviously want to put a little bit more stone. If you're building on, say, a limestone layer or different shale, you could maybe cut down a little bit, but those are just good numbers to start, get you in the ballpark. You always want to try to build on something solid. It's just like the parable of the wise builder in the Bible when Jesus is explaining the house built on the rock is obviously going to hold up a lot longer than the house built on the sand. Obviously, he was pointing to some deeper things and getting the people thinking more, but it's a good metaphor that can be used in this as well. Like, you want to make sure you have a rock solid foundation for your driveway. You want to make sure this thing holds up, especially down the road if you've got delivery trucks coming in and out. It's something that most people don't think about. They don't consider like the heavier trucks that might come on their driveway a couple times a month, or not so often. But you don't want if you're putting down asphalt, you don't want it to crack just because a heavier truck comes on. You want to make sure that it's going to hold up. The fabric I was talking about, the non-woven, they usually come in 300 or 360 foot lengths, and that could even be a pricing option, but the homeowner might not want to pay it, so just give it out as an option. It's always a good barrier. Just explain to them the benefits, but at the end, it's up to them if they don't want to use it. If they want to try to save some costs, that's fine, but I strongly recommend it. It just gives peace of mind. It can really help out. Also, when you're doing your calculations, you want to look at things, especially if you're bidding this job, road conditions, the road you're building the driveway off of. How busy is it? Is it a state road? Are you going to need flagging involved when you're cutting out along it? Are you going to need signs, cones? Pretty much wherever you are, you're going to need some sort of sign or cone, or at least your pickup truck out there with its lights on to warn people that you're working along the road. But definitely consider that, especially if you need flaggers. That's going to be an extra expense. And the next step in this process is the actual build. You want to start out obviously by cutting out all the topsoil, removing all the loose soil and debris, and you want to start going down. After you do all your calculations, it all depends what the people want too. If they want asphalt, when it's all said and done, if they want concrete, or maybe they just want gravel now, but they want setup for those things. You want to make sure you're deep enough that when they come in down the road to put the asphalt down, that they're not ripping out your base and only having a couple inches of base and all the asphalt. You want to make sure that this thing is built right. So I usually typically try to go down about a foot just to get a nice base layer in that'll leave your 4 inches of sub base, your 4 inches of base, and your 4 inches of top material. So once you start getting that established, you want to, or get cut out, you want to make sure it's all going to drain well. A French drain might be necessary at this time if you've got a low area or an area you can already kind of see getting kind of wet. You want to get that water out of there. You never want anything ponding up under your driveway. You then want to roll it, make sure it's all nice and smooth, nice and tight, nice and solid. This is the time, if there's any questionable spots, you can dig them a little deeper and touch them up, but this is a good time to tell how solid the driveway is going to be. Once it's rolled in nice and smooth, then you want to roll out your fabric, get it nice and tight, no wrinkles, you make sure it's overlapping about a foot from one piece to another. Then you're ready to, once it's nice and flat, to start putting down your stone. If you don't have your fabric nice and flat, then you're more likely to catch it with your doze or skid loader when you're starting to spread your stone. When you're spreading your stone, you want to obviously start out at the entrance. You have everything cut out at this point, and the trucks, they might be tempting to try to draw them on the fabric, but it's going to pull the fabric. It's just going to roll it with their tires. It's going to move. So start by dumping stone at the entrance, getting a nice pad, and working your way in by putting your 4 inches, 5 inches out as you go. You want to make it a little thicker because by the time it compacts, it's going to be a little bit less. So get a nice layer of subbase in there, get it rolled nice and tight. Then you can move on to your base, your modified, your smaller stone. Make sure that subbase is rolled first. Then do your base. Do the same thing. Take your time. Make sure you get your uniform depth the whole project, 4 inches, to make sure it's nice and solid the whole way. And then you're ready for whether your asphalt or your concrete or whatever, or maybe there's having a gravel finish. That's where you really take your time getting a nice smooth finish for them. That's what people are going to see. They don't want ruts and divots. Really take your time going back and forth, different directions, rolling it, regrading it, rolling it on your final layer to make sure it's a nice finished product when it's all said and done. In a nutshell, that's basically the process for building a rock solid driveway. You want to make sure that you've got a good location. You want to make sure that you do your calculations, take time to do it right. And you want to make sure you take your time on your build to make sure that everything's going in properly, you're getting your right dimensions, and that it's all going to be built to last. This is something that's very important for the homeowner. It's going to be something that they have to use each and every day. You're not going to have to use it, they are. So you want to make sure it holds up for them, that they're going to be happy with it, and it's going to work and meet their needs. That's what it's all about at the end of the day, is meeting the customer's needs, helping them, and this will be a better place if you do that properly. Let me know if you've got any questions. I know whenever some of those things kind of fast, if there's an area that you're a little bit confused about or you'd like better explanation, leave a comment and I will try to do a video in the future to meet some of those needs, answer some of those questions. But hopefully that helps. Like I said, I would just love it, any engagement, whether you guys want to leave a comment and something that works for you well or something that you would like better explanation on. I'd be more than happy to help. See you next time.